Well, in terms of reform, it's never been centered on black kids. It's just like, I used to be a public school teacher, and every time we get a new superintendent, you get a new mandate and big old binder full of the new superintendent's plan. And then when that one left, you threw that one away and then got the next one. And so that's what reform is. By the middle of 2022, we'll have another kind of reform. There'll be some other kind of reform. Right now, it's the equity reform. You have all of these equity things. I'm working on 2 of them. And so it's never been centered on black kids. It's just these reform things that people dream up, and then not very little changes for black students. So if you look at reform efforts, they just come and they go and they come and they go. And white people tend to make enormous amounts of money off of those, because for as long as the reform is being done, then they'll go into these schools and do all this research and get all this money and write all these reports. But then the students so Chicago, back in the 80s or 90s, would be a good example of that. That was sort of the origin of these PLCs. These, every school had its own little governing body, and this was going to help all these black kids, thousands of black kids in Chicago. And then after all the researchers went in and did all this work, Tony Bright and all these people, and then when that was over, they're gone. They got plenty of money. They got lots of publication. Where are the kids in Chicago public schools right now?
Federal data shows an educational divide in schools that impacts everything from graduation rates to discipline.
Pinkston says when he was growing up in West Austin, some families sent their kids out of the neighborhood to get a good education.
You're not in a good elementary school, you're gonna most likely go to a middle school that's not good. And then when it's time to take the test again, these good schools in Chicago, you haven't been trained for this.
The UIC junior is studying secondary education and says he wants to teach in his childhood neighborhood.
We need to make sure that these neighborhood schools are being the best. They're the best of the best. I should be able to just walk to a good school.
In Chicago, statistics show there is a stark educational divide by race. Black and brown students make up the large majority of CPS students, but a ProPublica analysis of 2015 federal data shows white students are 2.3 times more likely to be enrolled in at least one advanced course as black students.
So reform never centers on us. It centers us more of a money-making, I got this good idea, we're going to get Tony Paul Vallis in here, and so forth and so on. And then the next thing you know, it's not reform. And, it's another kind of reform. And then I also think that we need to go back to an old model of after school or Saturday school programs for black kids. And so I think what needs to happen with parents is we need to help them understand the consequences, the ramifications of them being silent. Because when you get silent with these teachers, then they do whatever they want to or don't want to. And so I do think parents are too passive in terms of their kids' education. They need to make sure they're engaged with the school. They need to make sure they check in with the school. They need to make sure they understand the ramifications, the consequences of standardized tests. Thus, understand the consequences of failing a subject. Understand the consequences of absenteeism. They have to understand all this stuff. And then they have to hold people accountable, not only at the building level, but at the school board level. And so if you don't go to school board meetings and you just, you don't get involved in this, not much you can complain about when the kid comes home with, well, they failed this grade, and you say, well, I didn't know they were failing. And which I've had parents say to me, or relatives say, well, how didn't you know? Why didn't you know that?